12. Laura Gallagher. In November 2023, a police officer's girlfriend threw a tantrum after she was kicked out of a Florida bar for allegedly touching a young man with her chest. 43-year-old Laura Gallagher was accused of rubbing herself against the underage employee's arm at the establishment in Daytona. In fact, a 911 caller claimed that Gallagher harassed the teen repeatedly over the course of several hours before she took things even further and made physical contact. The caller also told the dispatcher that the victim was freaked out by Gallagher's behavior. And while the victim didn't want to press charges against the woman who accosted him, Gallagher allegedly refused to leave without making a scene when instructed to do so. Her erratic behavior was captured in police body cam footage, which showed her insisting she wasn't drunk before the officer warned her not to drive. Gallagher denied touching the victim inappropriately as she got out of her car and acted confused about why the police weren't letting her drive. Just when it seemed like the irate woman couldn't make the situation any worse for herself, she bragged about how her cop boyfriend supposedly lets her get away with murder. Gallagher certainly wasn't going to get away with murder in this instance, or anything close to it. But this reality failed to sink in as she resisted arrest and spewed insulting names at the cop trying to handcuff her. After being placed in the back of a patrol car, Gallagher cried to a different police officer about how the arresting officer allegedly face-planted her into the pavement. She also made an ignorant comment about trusting a white cop more due to his race. And while her cop boyfriend may have supposedly let her get away with murder, this incident ended with her being charged with multiple crimes, including battery on a law enforcement officer, driving under the influence, disorderly intoxication, and resisting an officer with violence. 11. Hayden Panettiere. American actress Hayden Panettiere is wealthy, famous, and beautiful. She certainly has no shortage of options when it comes to dating, yet she stayed with her convicted felon boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, even after he was put on probation until 2025 over some domestic violence charges involving their relationship. And being under supervision didn't stop Hickerson from showing the side of his personality that most likely got him in trouble in the first place when he lashed out at a fellow group of partiers at an LA celeb hotspot in 2022. Footage shows Panettiere trying to pull her hot-headed partner away from the group after complete chaos broke out, with some alleging that Hickerson spat on one of the revelers. In the video, Panettiere can be heard yelling, "Brian, jail," as if to remind him that he's already on thin ice with the law. A representative for the actress said that Hickerson had commented to someone about leaving their server a poor tip, and that the other party had started the fight. When things got physical, security pushed everyone involved out of the restaurant and asked those who were not involved to go back inside. The spokesperson also said that Panettiere was attacked during her attempt to break up the brawl. By the end of the ordeal, Hickerson was challenging his opponents to round 2, while Panettiere begged him to stop. After the incident, the on-and-off couple broke up, and they claim that they've parted ways for good this time, but they've been known to end up back together in what appears to be a disturbingly toxic codependency. So only time will tell if they're really over. 10. Tierra Binion. In August 2023, a 25-year-old mother of twins named Tierra Binion was viciously beaten by a couple at a Florida bar. The incident occurred at around 1 in the morning in the parking lot outside Mugs and Jugs in Pensacola. According to police, the fight began as a mutually combatant exchange between Binion and 23-year-old Rachel DeRise. It ceased to be a fair fight when DeRise's boyfriend, Christian Ketchup, allegedly punched Binion in the side of the head, knocking her out cold. Even after Binion fell unconscious, the attack continued, according to Escambia County Sheriff Chip Simmons, who told local station WEAR that DeRise jumped on top of Binion's motionless body and continued to strike blows. Then, apparently for good measure, Ketchup fired 7 bullets into Binion, killing her at the scene. He then dialed 911 and admitted to his crime. Ketchup was charged with murder and held without bail pending his trial, which was originally scheduled for January 2024. The current status of the case is unclear, but records show that nobody by Ketchup's name is currently serving time in state prison, indicating that the matter is likely ongoing. 9. Jennifer Griffith. 46-year-old Jennifer Griffith was an American expat living in Belize when she met with an unexpected tragedy that cut her life short in April 2024. It all began in San Pedro while she was riding as a passenger on a golf cart being driven by her husband. The vehicle crashed into a bar called El Norte, sparking a confrontation between the couple and some employees. One of the workers threw a conch shell and it struck Jennifer in the head, after she may have already hit her head during the collision. Either way, the altercation escalated into a full-on brawl. Jennifer initially turned down medical attention. In an unexpected twist, she went to the hospital the next day, complaining of head pain, and died from her injuries. Authorities initially said that it was unclear whether she succumbed to injuries she sustained in the crash or from having a conch shell thrown at her head. Shortly thereafter, however, an autopsy revealed that Jennifer died from being struck in the head with a projectile. In other words, that the conch shell caused her fatal injuries. In a statement, Police Commissioner Chester Williams said that conch shell fragments had been found in Jennifer's head. Williams also made it clear that the person who threw the shell did not seem to strike Jennifer on purpose, and that he threw the object indiscriminately. It remains unclear whether any legal action will be taken against the shell thrower. 8. Devin Repath and Matthew Marsiglia. Until April 2024, 27-year-old Devin Repath was an ordinary father of 2 from Louisiana. That unfortunately changed when he died in a bar fight in Baton Rouge, resulting in the arrest of 21-year-old Matthew Marsiglia on a manslaughter charge. Repath was celebrating at a friend's bachelor party that he had organized at Fred's Bar when the fatal fight occurred shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning. According to law enforcement, surveillance footage showed Repath punching an unidentified man in the head in the bar's parking lot. Repath and Marsiglia proceeded to exchange words and pushed each other around for a few moments before Marsiglia shoved Repath, causing him to fall and hit his head on the pavement. Police arrived at the scene to find Repath unresponsive. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where he died from his injuries. The medical examiner who performed his autopsy ruled his cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. The manner of death was ruled as a homicide. At the time, Marsiglia was an engineering student at Louisiana State University. He was suspended from the college following the deadly incident and was subsequently freed on a $50,000 bond. Since leaving the Jefferson Parish Jail, Marsiglia has requested permission to leave the state to work on a family farm in Magnolia, Mississippi. It's unclear whether the request was granted, and the case is ongoing. 7. Michael Lameth. Wanting to be closer to her son and newborn granddaughter, Deborah Jost moved from Ohio to Florida in 2015. She had no idea that she would die in a bar fight in Daytona Beach just 3 years later. On what began as an ordinary day in late April, a stranger later identified as Michael Lameth approached her at a bar and grabbed her chest from behind. Deborah reportedly told Lameth to get off her, and another man told him to leave the bar. Lameth allegedly left, only to return a short while later with his friend, Matt Dellinger. They attempted to enter the bar as Deborah tried holding the door shut to keep them out of the building. Dellinger pushed the door open and Lameth punched Deborah in the mouth, causing her to fall backwards and hit her head on the floor. She died from her injuries, and as it turned out, this was not Lameth's first time hitting someone at a bar. Back in June of 2013, Lameth was accused of punching a woman named Kelly Broussard outside a bar shortly before 1:30 a.m. one morning. The incident began when he got into an argument with some of Broussard's friends at a strip club in New Smyrna Beach. Lameth was escorted out into the parking lot, and Broussard followed. The two exchanged words, causing the situation to escalate as Lameth assumed a fighting stance. According to a police report, Lameth punched Broussard, causing her to land face first on a wooden step. She cut her nose but refused medical treatment, and Lameth pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery. Following the death of Deborah Jost, he pleaded no contest to felony battery and manslaughter charges. Lameth was sentenced to 11 years in prison, followed by 8 years of probation. 6. John Richard Krause and Nathan John Green. A 27-year-old Florida man named Nathan John Green had already served a probation sentence for striking a man during a bar fight, when he allegedly got into yet another bar fight, this time with deadly results. In addition to serving probation, Green had been ordered to undergo an anger management class following the first fight. Just 2 months after he completed his sentence in 2017, he struck 46-year-old U.S. Army veteran John Richard Krause repeatedly in the face outside a bar in New Smyrna Beach. Krause fell backward and hit his head on the pavement, and while he sought medical assistance in a timely fashion, he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries a little more than a month later while in hospice care. More than 2 years passed before authorities decided to charge Green with manslaughter in connection with the second fight. He was arrested in January 2020, and more than 4 years later, the case appears to be ongoing. It's unclear why the matter is taking so long to resolve or what the next steps are. If convicted as charged, Green could face a prison sentence of up to 15 years. 5. Vincent Hollingsworth and Marion Stevens. What began as a seemingly innocent pool game at a bar in St. Petersburg, Florida, ended in death one Sunday night in April 2017. 62-year-old Vincent Hollingsworth and 32-year-old Marion Stevens got into an argument at the Stinger Bar following a game against one another. According to the police, Hollingsworth hit Stevens over the head with a pool cue multiple times. And then Stevens crept up behind Hollingsworth and struck him over the head with a beer bottle. Stevens hit Hollingsworth several more times as bouncers tried to separate the men, and Hollingsworth fell, hitting his head against the pool table on his way down. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries early the next morning. Hollingsworth was pronounced dead at around midnight. Stevens left the bar in a taxi, but was arrested the next day on a manslaughter charge. He already had a somewhat lengthy criminal record, which included prior arrests for cocaine possession and battery on a law enforcement officer. Records show that nobody is currently serving time in the state prison system under the name Marion Stevens. He's also no longer in custody at the Pinellas County Jail, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. In a somewhat surprising twist, this wasn't the first time someone died by violent means at the Stinger Bar. 2 years earlier, in April 2015, Juan Javier Oquendo fatally shot 33-year-old James Kaysen during an argument in the parking lot. One can only hope that there's never a third deadly disagreement at the seemingly ill-fated drinking establishment. 4. Lawrence Larry Hopkins. 61-year-old Lawrence Larry Hopkins was working as a bouncer at the Garden Bar and Grill in Brooklyn in early 2024 when a fight broke out at the establishment. The brawl began when a female coworker tried squeezing past 2 customers. It sparked an argument between the parties, and the customers blocked Larry's coworker from getting past. Hopkins was on his meal break at the time, but he noticed the disagreement and immediately stepped in to break up the altercation. By then, the fight had escalated into physical pushing and shoving, and while Larry tried to de-escalate the situation by encouraging everyone to relax, at at least one man failed to take his advice and instead stabbed him repeatedly, including once in the neck. As Larry suffered helplessly during his final moments, some bar patrons barely flinched or even looked up, and instead sat there finishing their drinks. People even stepped around Larry rather than stop to help him as he sat dying on a bench. Some bystanders were kind enough to administer first aid while Larry's coworkers dialed 911. But by the time help arrived, it was too late to save his life. Law enforcement released an image of a person of interest in the case, but according to the most recent available updates, the killer remains at large. In the meantime, Larry's friends and family remain devastated as they grieve his death. 3. Baraquiel Castellan. After spending 2 years languishing at Rikers Island for a stabbing he didn't commit, a 32-year-old dad from the Bronx named Baraquiel Castellan went to a neighborhood bar in early 2024 to relax and have some drinks. But something went terribly wrong during the night, and he was found bleeding to death from a neck wound outside El Chicanito shortly before 4 in the morning. Emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, but were unable to save his life. Castellan was murdered just a stone's throw away from his home, leaving his family heartbroken and wondering what went so horribly wrong. Police released a photo of the suspect, who unfortunately remains at large as of April 2024. The tragedy came 8 years after Castellan was featured in the news in a much different light. Back in 2016, he was accused of stabbing a man named Anthony Velasquez. Velasquez was the father of one of Castellan's siblings' children. And at the time, police believed that Castellan was a leader in the Mexican-American Cholos 152 street gang. Castellan denied being a gang leader, instead claiming that the alleged gangsters he hung around with were more like his friends. Velasquez survived the attack, and Castellan was charged with attempted murder. But he managed to beat the case, thanks to a witness who testified under oath that someone else stabbed Velasquez. Sadly, Castellan only got to enjoy a handful of years of freedom before his own life was taken from him. And the identity of his killer remains a mystery. 2. Nicholas Williams and Darcel Cole. Just days before Christmas in 2021, an argument broke out between two men at the Odalis restaurant in Silver Spring, Maryland. 29-year-old Darcel Cole and Nicholas Williams agreed to go outside and duke it out, despite Williams being visibly much larger than Cole and a trained boxer. The fight was captured on surveillance footage, which showed Cole lying unresponsive on the ground, while Williams struck him repeatedly. Williams then walked away, then returned to the scene and stomped on Cole's head multiple times before leaving him to die on the pavement. By the time Cole was found by people who were willing to help, he had sustained significant brain damage. He spent the next 9.5 months in the hospital in a vegetative state before succumbing to his injuries in October 2022. According to the medical examiner who performed Cole's autopsy, he died from complications resulting from head trauma. His death was therefore ruled a homicide, and Williams was charged accordingly with second-degree murder. Williams initially denied any involvement in the injuries that led to Cole's death, but he eventually admitted to committing the attack, which eventually proved fatal. Prosecutors also linked him to the crime through physical evidence, including clothing they found inside his car which matched the outfit he was wearing in the video of the attack. In 2024, Williams pleaded guilty as charged. He's currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for late May. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Austin Turner and Richard Cornelius. In February 2024, 26-year-old Austin Turner was denied entry into the popular Tin Roof Bar in Nashville, Tennessee. An altercation ensued between him and the security guard, 36-year-old Richard Cornelius, who knocked Turner to the ground, causing him to fall unconscious. Turner was taken to the hospital, where he clung to life for 16 days while comatose. In the meantime, Cornelius was charged with aggravated assault. In early March, Turner was taken off life support. He died from his injuries, and it remains unclear whether the charge against Cornelius will be upgraded. For now, his security license is suspended. The tragedy brought lingering concerns to the surface regarding other deaths that have occurred at the hands of security guards in and around Nashville. In hopes of preventing future incidents of this nature, and seeking proper justice in the unfortunate event that history does repeat itself, state lawmakers are now considering a proposed policy called Dallas's Law, named for 22-year-old Dallas Jordan Barrett, who was killed by unlicensed security guards outside Dierks Bentley's Whiskey Row bar. The law would require increased training, along with a specific focus on de-escalating tense situations. As of April 2024, the bill remains on the table, along with the future of the case against Cornelius.
Number 9. Hellish hazing. While pledging into the Theta Chi fraternity at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey in early 2022, 19-year-old Armand Runt fell down a flight of stairs. He was hospitalized with severe injuries, including multiple skull fractures, but miraculously, he survived the incident. In a lawsuit filed several months later, Runt claimed he was forced to drink life-threatening amounts of alcohol before he fell down the stairs. He accused fraternity members of trying to conceal evidence in the case and waiting 3 hours to call for medical help. Runt is seeking damages from Rutgers and the fraternity's local and grand chapters. Theta Chi and Rutgers declined to comment, citing policies against discussing ongoing litigation. However, they said they have a strict policy against hazing, and while Rutgers prohibits alcohol from being present at Greek events, some of the university students told News 12 New Jersey that hazing remains a problem on campus. Senior student Etienne Dido said that Rutgers does a lot in an attempt to prevent hazing, but at the end of the day, rules are still going to be broken behind closed doors. Several news outlets pointed out that Runt's case bears similarities to the 2017 hazing of Timothy Piazza, who repeatedly fell over after drinking a dangerous amount of alcohol during a pledging ceremony at Penn State University. The young man tumbled down a flight of stairs and landed face down at the bottom. He suffered severe head trauma, a shattered spleen, and a traumatic brain injury. Piazza's fellow pledges waited 12 hours to call an ambulance, despite being well aware that he was unresponsive. They also made several failed attempts to wake him. One member later claimed he confronted several of his frat brothers and insisted Piazza needed medical care, but was dismissed and told to leave the party. By the time he was taken to the hospital, he was gravely injured and covered in blood. He died several hours later, and some of the fraternity's members served jail time for their role in the tragedy. In 2021, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed the Timothy J. Piazza Law, imposing a statewide ban on hazing. Number 8. A crashed party. Literally. Carly Carroll was a sophomore at the University of North Texas in 2017 when she found herself feeling increasingly frustrated with the constant parties being thrown by the students who lived above her. She wasn't only bothered by the noise from the disruptive gatherings, she was scared because she noticed that her ceiling would bounce up and down as if it were on the verge of collapse. The young woman called the police in Denton, Texas, several times to complain, but it never stopped the next party from happening. After a major football victory against the University of Texas, Carly's upstairs neighbors threw one of their biggest bashes yet, with as many as 100 people cramming into the third-floor apartment. Things got even crazier when local DJ Deo Oyanuga arrived and began blaring music. He later told CBS 11 that he felt the floor sink while he carried his equipment inside, but he continued on with his plans. The apartment was soon packed to the brim and overflowing onto the balcony. Speaking with local station WFAA, the party's host, Abiola Basari, said that he could feel the floor shaking under the weight of the massive crowd. He realized things had gotten way out of hand, but was unable to get anyone to leave. Between the noise and the sight of the obviously unstable ceiling, Carly and her roommates no longer felt safe. They left and headed toward the police station to complain. In the meantime, the floor opened up and swallowed at least a half-dozen partygoers. They all plunged into Carly's apartment below, along with furniture, liquor bottles, and structural supports. Chaos ensued as people attempted to flee the growing hole, leaving some individuals perilously trapped on narrow remaining stretches of floor as they clung to the wall. Emergency responders rescued partygoers from between floors, while police down at the station told Carly that her apartment was completely destroyed. She lost nearly all her belongings and was among 50 of the building's residents who were suddenly homeless. While it's impossible not to expect college kids to be rowdy from time to time, it sounds like Carly's neighbor was overdoing it with the partying, and like it was severely interfering with her ability to live normally. Hopefully, she found a new place to live in a stabler building with quieter neighbors. Number 7. Polly Rogers. After finishing her last day of classes at the end of the 2018 spring semester, 20-year-old University of North Carolina sophomore Polly Rogers went out to celebrate in downtown Charlotte. She thought she'd have a fun time and then return home, but things took an unexpected, horrifying turn when she boarded a party bus that had been rented by the school's Kappa Sigma fraternity. As the bus drove toward an uptown bar, Rogers leaned against an emergency window and fell out, landing in the road's center lane. Witnesses rushed over to try and stop oncoming traffic, but motorists either didn't notice or ignored them and drove over the injured young woman. In the meantime, the rest of the 55 bus passengers huddled together outside as they struggled to take in the reality of what had just happened. Emergency responders pronounced Polly dead at the scene. Authorities were quick to conclude that speed most likely wasn't a factor in the tragedy, and there was no signs that she was being reckless or doing anything wrong. Victor Rabb, who owns the company that the fraternity rented the bus from, said it was the first time anything like this had ever happened in its 13 years of operation. He told local station WBTV that at some point someone must have pulled the emergency window, leaving it unsecured. Rabb said that he didn't know if anything could have been done differently to prevent Polly's death, since it was his first time dealing with this type of incident. In memory of the tragically killed student who was studying special education, staff at UNC's Botanical Gardens created a therapeutic environment for kids with autism and other disabilities called the Polly Rogers Memorial Sensory Garden. Number 6. Rachel Lennart. In 2015, 35-year-old mother of 5, Rachel Lennart, hosted a party at her home in Evans, Georgia for her daughter and the young woman's friends. She was later accused of allowing the teens to drink and smoke marijuana. She even allegedly participated in a game of Naked Twister before retreating to a bathroom with an 18-year-old man for intimacy. Things got even more bizarre after the bathroom encounter when Lennart supposedly put on an obscene performance in the living room while partygoers watched. After the bash, the former Mormon Sunday school teacher realized her behavior was out of control and vowed to quit drinking, which she'd started doing recently after separating from her husband. She sought help from Alcoholics Anonymous and spilled the details of the wild party to her sponsor. Her sponsor then reported Lennart's disturbing claims to the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, and an investigation was launched. She was charged with 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor and ended up losing custody of all 5 of her children. She was sentenced to 6 years of probation, and she reassured the public that she was dedicated to remaining sober and getting professional help to prevent her from behaving in such an unacceptable way ever again. An undisclosed source told the New York Daily News that as someone who grew up in the Mormon church, Lennart never drank alcohol until well into her adulthood. She began hitting the bottle after her husband of 15 years returned from a military deployment to Iraq with anger issues and post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the source, as an inexperienced drinker, Lennart didn't know how to handle her alcohol. This meant that she did herself a huge favor by quitting, especially after a handful of bad decisions nearly ruined her life. Number 5. Millie Robinson and Bailey Meadows. During the early days of the coronavirus lockdown in April 2020, police responded to a noise complaint at a residence in the English town of Eastbourne. It was clear to the officers that an illegal party was going on in violation of COVID-related restrictions. They were met by two combative young women who denied them entry into the home. The girls also punched and kicked the officers, and they threw a toilet roll holder at them. One of the suspects, 21-year-old Millie Robinson, was noticeably intoxicated and warned a female officer to watch out, claiming she was infected with the coronavirus. When a male officer tried to arrest Robinson, she became violent. She and her friend, 21-year-old Bailey Meadows, were arrested for their behavior. In court, Robinson's lawyer said his client was struggling to adjust to lockdown, which had caused her mental health to decline. The attorney defending Meadows also cited mental health struggles, but said that his client didn't remember much of the incident. Robinson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of assaulting an emergency worker and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Meadows pleaded guilty to assault with actual bodily harm and received a 1-year sentence. Number 4. Terror at Texas A&M. 2 people were killed and at least a dozen others were injured in 2019 when a gunman opened fire on a crowd at a party in Greenville, Texas. 4 of the survivors were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Most of the attendees at the off-campus homecoming bash were Texas A&M University students. As many as 750 people packed into the bar-like party venue. When the shots rang out, hundreds of partygoers frantically tried to flee the building, with some even shattering the windows in their attempts to escape. Law enforcement was already on the scene in response to complaints about vehicles parked illegally along the side of the road. They were questioning a seemingly drunk partygoer when the chaos broke out, but were unable to immediately pursue the shooter due to the panicking crowd. This gave the suspect an opportunity to quietly slip away into the night. During a news conference, Hunt County Sheriff Randy Meeks said that the attendees were being uncooperative with investigators and that nobody seemed willing to provide a description of the shooter. It was hard to believe that not a single person caught a good enough look at the perpetrator to describe them to the police. Authorities arrested a 23-year-old suspect, but the charges were dropped just weeks later. If anyone knows anything about the shooter, they're keeping tight-lipped about it, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Number 3. Maskless mayhem. In early 2021, somewhere between 500 and 800 students from the University of Colorado's Boulder campus flooded the streets of a nearby neighborhood. They partied outside for hours without their COVID masks, setting off fireworks, blaring music, and even flipping over a car. Police arrived in a SWAT vehicle and warned the partygoers to leave the area over a loudspeaker, threatening to deploy tear gas if they failed to comply. That was all some students needed to hear to convince them to leave, but others were less cooperative. The stubborn stragglers began yelling expletives. They charged at the cops. Some of them even threw rocks and bottles at the officers. The chaos eventually dissipated, leaving some officers with minor injuries and damage to property and cars, including street signs and emergency responders' vehicles. In a news conference following the mayhem, Boulder County District Attorney Michael Doherty made it clear that what happened wasn't a party, but a riot. He and other officials vowed to track down those responsible for the reckless behavior so they could be held accountable for their actions. By the time the investigation concluded months later, 10 arrests had been made in connection with the destruction, and 3 suspects had warrants out for their arrest. Number 2. Carly Wood. During the early morning hours one day in November 2022, police were dispatched to a home in Omaha, Nebraska in response to a reported shooting. They arrived to find 20-year-old Carly Wood dead from a gunshot wound. 7 others at the scene had also been shot, but they were still alive. The survivors were rushed to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Investigators concluded that the shooting wasn't random, but they don't believe Carly was the intended target. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she paid for it with her life, bringing her dreams of home ownership to an untimely end. Authorities urged the public to come forward with tips that could help solve the crime and offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the shooter's identification and arrest. Several weeks later, they charged 25-year-old Imhotep Davis with 7 felonies, including second-degree murder, assault, using a weapon to commit a felony, tampering with evidence, and more. Davis remains behind bars while awaiting his next scheduled court date in early 2023. Few details about the circumstances of the shooting have been released, and the case is ongoing. Number 1. Rodney Tyreek Cohen II. During a house party to welcome back a returning soldier in Cobb County, Georgia in 2017, an altercation broke out among partygoers. Multiple people began firing into the crowd, and a 20-year-old man from Dallas, Texas, named Rodney Tyreek Cohen II was shot several times and died from his injuries. Officers who responded to the scene determined that Cohen was involved in the disagreement, but they declined to reveal whether he had a gun. In early 2018, suspects James Hunter Raynal, Austin James Postel, and Adam Maurice Summers were indicted on counts of malice murder and felony murder. The story went quiet in the news, and the outcome of the case is unclear. Records show that Raynal was released from prison in June of 2022 after serving a year behind bars for what appear to be unrelated charges.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather be arrested under false allegations of participating in a bar fight, or be the key witness to getting a powerful and well-liked person convicted for hurting someone during a bar fight? Let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.